Hi, I'm Charlie Mato-Toyela from BlueBearFlutes.com. Of course, our YouTube channel is also Blue Bear Flutes, as well as Instagram and so many other places you'll find us. Today, we're doing our second class of the Blue Bear Flutes 12-week beginning to intermediate flute playing course. The second class is, as you may know, if you've downloaded the curriculum, it is the River Cane dancing song, as well as a few extra techniques and a little bit more information about this and that, as we always do. And then, of course, we travel on to the third class, which is how to practice effectively. The fourth class is a second song that we're going to do, which is one we'll actually write here during the lesson. And then 5 is the alternate scales for the major, and then so on and so on and so on. Like I say, it's 12 weeks of how to play the Native American flute. And it's, of course, at your pace. So if you decide to take it all in one day, oh my gosh, I hope you have time. But anyway, so to get started right off, the first thing that you should always do during the beginning of these classes, it's a good habit to get into, and we're hoping to build the best habits for beginners as well as intermediate flute players, and even those advanced flute players out there that might have made some bad choices. Maybe this will help you to iron those out. So if you have what we call a Native American flute in hand, that's usually the type that has a little block here on the top and has a leather tie or some type of cord here with a few fingerings in the front, usually not one in the back. That would be a kenna or some type of South American flute, or maybe even a recorder, which of course I can play the recorder to make it sound like this. That's not this class though. Anyway, so hold this flute in your hand. If you have a sixth hole, which is going to be between these 2 fingers here and these 3 fingers down there, that your flute maker has instructed you to keep covered to play the scale properly. If you're curious about why that is, we have videos on traditional 6-hole flute making and playing, which is a little bit different than the type that is. However, if they've told you to cover it for some reason, just keep that sucker covered and you'll be playing it right along with us perfectly. So having said that, pick the flute up, put your fingers on the holes. You don't even have to put it to your mouth at this point. Put your fingers on the fingerings there. Make sure that you can feel them covered completely. That is so important. And as I've always told my students, when I pick my flute up, even I've been playing for over 30 years at this point in my life, I always do this. You'll see me do it. I'm usually so quick that you won't even notice, but I'll pick my flute up and I put my fingers over the hole so I know where they are at. This is not my own personal memory. This is my athletic memory, it's called. It's how your hands know how to do things, just like in martial arts or even playing soccer. You learn how to kick it exactly just right. And that's what it takes to play the flute. So put your fingers over the holes. Once you've got that, before you even put it up to your mouth, take your fingers off the holes. And the reason for this, like I say, is now your hand is set in the position that the fingers can go back to covering the holes, and it's convenient. As a matter of fact, you notice there's some memory there. You don't do this number, you know. So now that your fingers are in the right place, take them off. Flute up to your mouth. On most Native American flutes, and of course that is, please forgive me, if you're having a 6-hole flute that is supposed to keep this finger covered for whatever crazy reason it is, keep that finger covered because that's how you play it. Uncover like this, and as I always say, also the top note, which is all holes uncovered, all holes but that 3rd finger on a 6-hole, modern 6-hole flute, is the highest note of the natural scale of your flute. If your flute is in the key of A, for example, the bottom note is an A, C, D, E, G, A. The rest of the notes are on my online class page as well. If you need to know what flute you have, just pick what scale it's in and you'll see all the notes if that's important to you. But with all holes covered, the bottom note, like in this E flute, the top note is an octave above the bottom note. So all holes covered is the bass note of the flute, and all holes uncovered, except for that 6th hole if you have one of those modern 6-hole flutes. Like I said, I got videos on that, you can check it out. But all holes uncovered is the octave of that note. Now yes, there are other notes you can achieve, but you don't need to know those right now. That's an advanced technique. We'll get to it sometime down the road. However, for playing the Native American flute, those basic 5 notes plus the octave of the lowest note are all the notes that you're going to need. So as you're learning to play your flute, or once again, if you've made some habits and you want to kind of go back over what somebody who's been playing for a long time, on stage, in person, real life, out in the woods, you know, several albums, that's what we're here for, and I do appreciate you watching. So all holes uncovered, as I said, is the easiest note for you to play on most flutes, even the silver transverse flute or an Irish fife or a recorder or anything of the sort. All holes open is usually a flawless note, and then you can cover the top hole. That's usually the next note down, and as you cover them one at a time, leave the previous holes covered. And once again, all the way down, all holes covered is the lowest note. If you've seen when I was playing the ultra high note, or if I'm playing like the blues scale, I'm covering some notes, and it seems like they're out of order because I've got a finger up here that's uncovered. If I'm playing the high notes, you can see that I am uncovering the top hole and down here. Once again, those are advanced techniques, most of which we'll go over before the 12 weeks are up. And in those advanced techniques, you'll find everything that you could possibly question about what are you doing with those fingers. But for the basic scale, just the typical Native American flute scale, you want to uncover them one at a time, keeping them all uncovered as you go. And when you cover them up like that, you want to cover this hole, leave it covered, cover this hole, leave it covered, cover that one, leave it covered, same and same. It is such a simple instrument to play, and for that reason, a lot of people that are intermediate to advanced flute players may have thought, well, this is just going over some very easy stuff, and it really is. However, that very easy stuff sometimes gets overlooked, and for that reason, like I said, we try to do this at the beginning of each one of our lessons. I wouldn't recommend skipping through because there's going to be some really good stuff on in there as well. However, breathing, sitting up straight, holding the flute properly, these are all habits that you have to get into if you're going to be, well, you really should get into. I guess you could play it pretty well if you develop some bad habits, if you find some workarounds, but this is what works for me. So. And that leads us into our first technique that we're going to go over today because it pertains to the song in this video. This is a technique that I call my jumping bird technique, and when I go to elementary and high schools and middle schools, well, usually I guess just middle and high schools, granted it's been a while, but when I have gone to those, they always find it's funny because it's my jumping bird technique. I'm not sure exactly why they think that's funny, but anyway, this is actually a technique that I call the jumping bird technique because a lot of the original stories of the Native American flute talk about a little bird that taught us how to play the flute and also taught us how to make the flute. This is a story we'll go over actually in our week 8 lesson, which is going to be traditional stories about the Native American flute and what is traditional. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that 6-hole flute a little bit, not too much, just a little bit, and we'll go over a few other things that you might really be interested in. And for this particular case, the jumping bird technique is one that I use, and I usually use it on this finger. There are people who use it on this top hole because it gives them one more note they can jump. For me, I don't, because it just feels, I guess, more comfortable. So there again, if it feels better for you to do it on this other hand or this other finger or up here, whatever's best for you. This is something that is for your benefit. Do it how it feels best for you. So this is the jumping bird technique. Watch my fingers and watch this one specifically while I'm moving these 3 fingers. And you see this little finger here makes kind of a flutter, something like a bird, just kind of jumping or maybe fluttering its wings really fast. And it does that at both the start, or, and it's not very often you hear both and or in the same sentence, but it's at both the start and or the finish of the note. When I am either putting my finger down, I'll lift this finger up, or when I'm picking this finger up, I'll lift this finger up. I'm going to do it in ultra slow motion, well, as humanly possible. I'm not going to show you this with the video in slow motion because that won't help you any. But this is how you will learn to do the jumping bird technique. So watch my fingers. I'm going to start at the bottom note and go to the top, and I'm going to kind of slowly and gradually speed up the technique. And that's really about it, going up as I'm uncovering holes. And as I cover the hole, and that doesn't sound very pretty. It really doesn't. It's kind of cool sounding. I mean, if you're into making spooky music on your flute. But as far as playing the jumping bird technique, that's what we're shooting for here. The jumping bird technique. So I'm only picking this finger up. Let's say I'm uncovering the hole. I'm picking it up at almost the same exact instant. It's actually a syncopated rhythm. If you're a musician, this is a syncopated rhythm. Or if you're a flautist, this is a grace note or a single trill, or there's, I don't know how many different ways flutists call this, but this grace note or intro note, if you would, is played so quickly at the beginning of opening that fingering. So it's really simple. You just have to practice it a couple times. And I recommend rewinding this part of the video and practicing that step to see what it takes to make it go from you can go about it that way, or the best thing I think is to always go back and do the same step each time. So if you're playing the note as an opening of that fingering, keep practicing the opening of that fingering with that note. You can actually vary the speed at which you remove this finger to make a slightly different effect. I don't know if you can tell that, but there's a difference in speed from when I played it on the first note to when I played it just now. It makes a completely different sound. It's a different barking sound, if you would, that people call it, when you play it in slow-mo versus when you play it really fast. And so that's a technique, as you hear. Many of you have watched my YouTube channel for a long time, which I recommend subscribing to if you would, if you haven't already. Even if you don't, go back and watch one of my videos. The intro of the video sounds watch. That one is going down as I'm covering the note, which is what we're going to start on now. In that technique, I went even slower. And I know we're talking about microcosms, fractions of seconds that we're talking about here. But applying it properly, the right application is going to generate a complete ooh and ah feeling, not just for you or for your audience. Even if there's squirrels and pets at home, they're going to really enjoy what you're playing when you do it a certain way. And I try to abstain from saying the right way, because right is up to you. Truth is in the eye of the beholder. That's one of my favorite things to say. People always believe it's beauty is in the eye of the beholder. If I'm not mistaken, the original adage is truth is in the eye of the beholder. That is a hidden piece of information, just like this technique. And now on our way back down, there's a fraction of a second before I actually cover this finger up. if you notice, when I do it that way, it is almost 2 extra notes that I'm playing. You can hear those 2 separate notes when I uncover it and when I cover it back up, and this note. Da 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 da. You hear that? Versus it's 3 notes. So there's so many different ways you can use this technique, and don't feel bashful about practicing it every which way you can possibly come up with. You might even find ways in your time and day than I've ever found in my life. It's a great technique though, like I said, and especially if you're playing for others, they love hearing that barking sound. They really do. Other than the sorrowful, long phrasing that we talked about in the last class, this barking sound is one of people's absolute favorites, so it has a lot of potential. So you hear 2 different versions of it. Versus. That's when you cover both holes at the same time versus covering this one up really quick. And I'm not tapping my finger twice here, I'm just trying to do that to show you. When this finger here covers this hole up really quick, it's partly me playing before I uncover the hole and when I cover the hole. So, versus. You can hear it. It's a technique. It is very tricky and it's a really great one. Like I said, that's why I try to include it in the first couple of classes here, because it's something that as soon as you get the hang of it, you're going to be like, wow, this is great stuff. So another thing that we're going to cover during this lesson is a slur. Now, as some of you may know, I started playing the trombone early in life. So I played the old T-bone for a while. And in the trombone, there are different kinds of slurs. If any of you have ever watched Charlie Brown, or the Peanuts if you call it that, or if you've watched cartoons especially, but even, you know, I love some old black and whites where they use this sound, but any of that kind of sound where you hear that wah, 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 I do it with my mouth, of course, as we all do. That is a slur on a trombone using what's called a plunger mute. There have been some companies that made plunger mutes specifically, but typically most of us buy a toilet plunger, brand new, unscrew it off of there, the stick off of it, and we put it up to the trombone, and that's the sound that you've been hearing all your life. You can probably look it up somewhere, but it's wah, 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 wah. That is accompanied with wah, which is an actual slur. So that wah, 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 wah is a slur on a trombone. You can slur on most any instrument. This is how you do it on a Native American flute. It's the time that it takes you to fully cover the hole. As many of you may know, and as you'll find out in upcoming lessons, there again, an advanced technique of playing the flute is partially covering a hole. This produces like a half tone or a semitone. And these half tones are a chromatic note of sort. When you play the trombone, which I actually play other instruments, even older Native American instruments, which we may show during these videos, I'm not sure, it depends on time, but other instruments that you can play slurs with to completely play the instrument. You can do that a little bit with the Native American flute. So there's like 4 notes, and 2 of them are actual true semitones, which are a step in between the half steps, and then the other 2 notes are the actual full half steps of the notes. So is a half step. What we're doing with the slur is we are going from one step to the next. So what we're focusing on is going from point A, that's being the hole completely uncovered, to point B, the hole completely covered. We're breaking that up into an unlimited number of steps. So it's like this. If you want to watch my finger here, we just kind of slowly go over it. You can actually do a slur quickly, or you can do it slowly. it takes practice. It's a little bit easier technique than the previous one. However, how you do this slur really does have an effect on your listener. So if you're trying to create a certain kind of mood, like I don't even want to start to describe it. I always think spooky, but spooky means something different to other people. But if you're trying to make maybe an eerie sound or something of that nature, or even like a hollow sound, not like a hollow log or like a hollow instrument, but like in a hollow, if you know what I mean. So and like I said, going from point B to point A, you can do the same thing. So covered. You'll notice when you're going in the reverse step, when you're actually uncovering the hole, that immediately when you let your finger off, it's easy to let too much air out. So it tries to go to that note naturally when you first uncover it. So that's the part that takes the most practice. Covering the hole, it's when you actually fully cover it that makes the biggest jump. And it's because when you release a little bit of air, there's a major change that's going on. When you uncover it, there's a major change. When you're covering it, there's a major change. Both of which are actually a release of air that is causing the note change. So when you're uncovering it, you're releasing a great deal of air, and when you're covering it, it's a certain amount of it that's being released until you get to this point, and it's still a great amount of air being released until you fully cover it. So you know, you even hear it go you know, you can hear it transition from the slur note to the actual fully covered note. And that's because of the distance between here and here, you know. So if you uncover a little bit, you're creating note X, and if you uncover it all the way, it's note B, and if you cover it all the way, it's note 1.3 down here. So there's a vast change going on between this note here and that note there. And like I said, you can do this with any fingering. And it's good to use this sometimes at the beginning or the ending of a phrase. So and that's towards the end of a phrase. And that sound you heard just now was me partially uncovering a second hole. I was hoping to tell you that as well, but as you uncover this hole, you can partially uncover another hole, and it creates a different tone. Versus, and it's so useful. It's something that is actually an old technique. It's not one that people pay a whole lot of attention to in music, Native American flute music, that is, but it's there, and I know this because I've listened a lot of my life to how especially old music was played. Versus, and that's me doing a larger slur on the bottom note uncovering and a minor slur on the next note uncovering. So there's so many different ways. That's an advanced version of the slur. But that technique is one that will take you a long, long ways. And so the next thing we're going to go on into is the River Cane Dancing song, which is our practice song. You can download the flute tablature, if you will call it that. You can call it anything you want to. Some people call it a specific type of tablature, but because so many other instruments and other flutes have used tablature over the years, I focus on what it is. It's Flute Tab. But the flute tablature you can download from my online class page, and you can follow along with me on this next step. It's a very easy song. This is an old song that is kind of like my version of it, and I'll go through it a little step at a time here. Okay, so we're going to start off on the first couple of notes here, and although I haven't mentioned it yet in these first two classes, I will tell you this is so simple to read flute tablature, and then of course Native American flute tablature is usually only 5 or 6 fingerings, so it's pretty easy stuff. I'm going to show you right here, basically, the white dots are holes that are not covered. The black dots, or the filled in ones here, whatever you want to call them, are covered. So this is all holes open, and the next one is the top 2 holes covered. It's kind of like all holes open, and then top 2 holes. And if you'll notice, the next fingering is all holes open again. So that's all open. And then the one that my pencil's sitting on, so we skipped one there, the next one is 4 covered. So you have the bottom hole is open, just that one is open, and you have these 4 here covered. So it's easy stuff. We'll watch the fingerings here, and I'm going to stop right at the pause, right where this pencil sets right now. This is our practice song, River Cane Dancing, and I'm going to set the pencil right there, so that's where we're going to stop. Please forgive me if I have a mistake while I'm reading this upside down. I know a lot of people won't tell you that, but that's how I've got it set up right now. So all open, then 2, then open, then 2, then 4, then 2, then 3, then 4, then all closed, all covered. So, and I'm not going to use much style or anything. I'm not going to do any spacing. We'll talk about that in just a second. So just to start off so you can see what this is like. And of course, I have that tendency of vibrato at the end of a phrase, especially when it ends on a low note. So what we're looking at here is just the simple notes. You know, it's uncovered all, top 2 covered, uncovered all, top 2 covered, 4, top 4 holes covered, 2 holes, 3 holes covered, 4 holes covered, and then all covered is all filled in, all black there. If you'll notice, I've written a number below each of them. Now, you can do this a completely different way if you like. You'll notice on some of our upcoming written music that we have different symbols drawn. These are all up to you. You know, you can, whatever helps you to remember. This is like your shorthand, okay? Or it's Charlie's shorthand, or Jane or Bob or Jack or Jim or Jill or any other random bunch of names, your version of the shorthand. So drawing the dots is one thing, but the number below is just a count. It's not a second, it's not a beat, it's not anything specific. It is a count. I'm counting to 1 here, counting to 2 there, 1 here, 2 there, 2 there, 1, 1, 1, and finally 3. I'm going to show you again. Once again, we'll stop at the pause. I'm going to show you again what it's like when you write Flute Tab in this particular way, if you'll follow along and watch the count. Once again, I'm just kind of counting in my head based on what I feel like and the rhythm and speed that I'm going. And I might change it up a little bit, but you know, like I say, it's just a guide anyway. Easy stuff. I mean, it was so easy for you to see. 1 count, 2 counts, 1 count, 2, 2, 1, 1, 1, 3. And do it one more time. That's how you read Flute Tab. All holes open, 2, all holes open, 2 covered. And any time that you cover, just remember, you're not covering from the bottom. You're not covering some random note. You're covering exactly what it says. On this particular piece of tablature, we don't have any partially covered holes. If you find a piece of Flute Tab, which I've got some, of course, on my website, but if you find a piece of Flute Tab, and also in my upcoming book, which is another flute playing book, which is a really great one, lots of experience and lots of songs written in it, you'll see that I put a slash over the hole, and it's only like a half a piece of pie, right? So if the whole thing was a piece of pie, this is like a slash over the hole as well as half of the pie. So that means that you partially cover that hole. Once again, that's something for my book and for whatever tab that you see it on, but maybe everybody doesn't do it the same way. And maybe some people draw in accidentals or off-key notes, or maybe they'll draw the dot for this 6th hole being open, in which case you just cover the hole below it and uncover the one above it. I've got videos and information on how to play the 3rd fingering of a modern 6-hole flute, not the 6-hole flutes we make, but the modern version, how to cover it, how to make that note without having the finger in there. It's super easy, not anything we need to worry about. I'll discuss it over and over again, but it's nothing to really concern yourself with. The note doesn't really sound perfect in the scale, and there's lots of professional flute players out there saying, I use that note. I'm an advanced flute player, so I use it. Of course, this is psychology. You have to be so advanced that you can play that note. I mean, you get so advanced, you can play that note without the fingering. You don't need to worry about that. So following the flute tab, and once again, we're only going to go up to the pause, following the numeric value for the count, if you would, that I'm going to have there on the notes. I'm going to add some technique. Some techniques we worked on today, and maybe some we worked on the last video. And I might add some more in there that we'll be working on. I'm going to repeat it. So, very simple. You see me do the little jumping bird technique. You see me pronounce the notes a little differently, the tonguing techniques we talked about on the last lesson. And other than the vibrato, simple stuff. Sounds kind of like a neat song. Some of you may recognize it, some of you may not. But let's go ahead and travel on this time. And we'll just go from the beginning, maybe to the next pause. I might go into the next one, but we'll go as far as I feel like right now before I need to stop and talk about it. If you notice, there is one thing I did right there just before the pause. I was going to try to keep going, but I feel like you need to know this. I actually paused before the pause. So the pausing is here for phrasing purposes. So this is a phrase, and then from here to there is a phrase, and from here to here is a phrase, and then to the end is a phrase. Phrasing is just a way that you can guide your audience or plan what your next move is going to be. Am I going to repeat the same thing I've been doing? Am I going to do something a little different? Am I going to change the style just a little bit, just enough that it makes it obvious, you know, what am I going to do next? And that's what phrasing is all about. It also gives you a set ending and a set beginning. So if you need to stop playing, you can play up until your phrase and then you can stop. It's a good time to pause in some cases on a phrase. Some people don't pause on their phrases. I usually pause on my phrases, probably years of orchestral playing that's got me doing that. But you can go on and pause, but then there's another kind of pause. It's a silence. It's kind of like a rest, but in the case of this, it's not a rest. Rests are anticipated, I feel. Silence, when you hear it, you're like, wow. You know, it's really cool. It's an important feature of playing, especially this instrument, but really any instrument. And I know a lot of my YouTube subscribers are out there like, I bet he doesn't know anything about silence. Silence is really powerful stuff. It really is. If I got up here and didn't talk to you, didn't say anything, didn't explain what I was doing, think of what you'd get out of it. Some people are like, I get everything. But anyway, so the silence is very important. So let me go again. I'm going to start at the beginning after this first pause. I'm going to start at the beginning there, and I'm going to play to the second pause, and I'm going to let you hear what that silence sounds like again. Try to be a little more elaborate with it. So that pause there, that silence is so critical. It gave the listener something to expect. You were kind of leading them down a road, and then you stop for a minute. They're like, why is this guy stopping? It's very important stuff. And yeah, you can call it a rest, but because you have control over it and how much there is, and sometimes you might want to make it push out that last note a little further before you pause. Or you might want to go. You might want to be a little more mathematical and robotic and not, you know, so open with it. You might want to just kind of count that pause, in which case it turns into a rest, in my opinion. Silence and a rest, pause and a rest, you can call it anything you want to. Let's go ahead and continue on. I'm going to play this piece all the way through now. I think we've covered just about everything that I wanted to cover, and that way you can see kind of what it sounds like, and I may go back and over-elaborate on the way that I played it one more time, not talking. I'm going to go back and play it through maybe a second time after this first time so that you can hear maybe a couple of different ideas, something a little different that you can do. Actually kind of ad-libbed on those last two notes there. I changed them because I thought, you know, this would sound kind of cool, so I did that. Let's play it one more time, and I'm going to play with a few different accents, a few different techniques, if you would, for how I'm going to pronounce the notes, how I'm going to introduce the sounds, and I might stretch things out a little bit longer on some and a little shorter on others. Once again, this is your song. This is for you to play. You play it how you like. Unlike written music where you have to follow exact. I come from the school of blues, and we do what we want to. So y'all have my permission. Play this how you like. Play it slowly. Play it fast. Do whatever you want to do with it. Change it up. Don't change it up. You know, however you like. It's all good. It's just you. And that is how the ending is supposed to end. It ends on that second to the last note, which means basically you have this hole uncovered. So you're playing not all covered, but the second to the last note. And as you're playing that, you want to give it its moment. You know, it's like that note hardly ever gets played. This is the time we're going to play it, and this is its day. This is its whole show right here. And I'm, of course, over-elaborating, but that's how I want you to feel about it. That's how I feel about it. And that's the sound I'm trying to convey. So I'm going to start at the last line, at the beginning of the last line, which is in the middle of a phrase, but we're going to play from here to there, just so that you can get kind of an idea for it, keep you from having to rewind this part if you don't want to. Oh, I messed up. Sorry, guys. And the silence came right after that. It was really cool. It was good for me anyway. I hope you all liked it. And if you notice, I didn't vibrato that last time. I will tell you, there are times, and once again, I promise we're coming up on vibrato. Let me double check my notes. Hey, guess what? It's next lesson. So y'all get vibrato down. I'll show you all the secrets of how to... I'll show you all the secrets of how to vibrato really effectively and make it sound good. Of course, next class is how to practice effectively, which is very important. Once again, good habits. You need to build good habits. Don't get burned out. Oh my gosh, if you've picked up your flute, if you've owned your flute for a year and you played it for a month and you're like, I just can't get this, and you feel like you're getting burnt out, we're going to talk about that on the next lesson. So once again, I didn't vibrato on that last note because I wanted to change it up. I wanted to get a different feeling. I wanted to do something that maybe you weren't expecting, which is the purpose of me playing the flute for you, is to give you something that you might not be expecting. And it landed on the second to last note. Like I said, really one of my favorite ways to end a song too is not with what people are accustomed to hearing. So instead of that, it was a completely different. It sounded completely different. At least it did to me, once again. So, like I said, that's vibrato is going to happen on the next lesson. We'll talk more about that and a few other things that are incredibly, incredibly important with regards to techniques. We have some of my favorite techniques, my alien style, if you would. We'll talk about that. And I'll try to remember to bring a 4-hole flute with me, because sometimes in class I think, this is going to be distracting, and sometimes I talk myself into it. Oh, I'll show you my alien technique. So I'll do that, and we're going to talk about practicing effectively, which is something we try to build on a daily basis each time we come to this class, is how to play and how to practice effectively, how to build good habits in your playing. Posture, breath control, how to hold the flute is something as a beginner you really need to know. If you're late in the game, I mean, it's okay if you play your flute like this. It really is. For me, I just don't feel comfortable. I'm ambidextrous. I do some things left-handed and some things right-handed, but holding the flute like this just doesn't work out. I'm trying to find a finger. It doesn't work out for me. Whereas this way, hey, guess what? Finger ends went straight there. It's just like, wow. So if I can remind you, don't forget that when you're practicing the flute, if others hear you, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. Positive comments, oh my gosh, I can't believe you said that. I feel so wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Negative comments, I know what you're talking about. I've been trying to work on that. Or what do you think? What do you mean? And if it's really negative comments, why don't you try it? There's a way to get around it. Don't take any of it, negative or positive, to heart, because whenever you're doing something new, if it's new to others, they're going to have their feelings about it. You're going to have your feelings about it. The most important thing is we're working towards a goal. You're going to become a great flute player. And like I said, I just want to try to guide you that direction so that you can get what it is that you need. And of course, get kind of a jump on things. You've got a few years of experience sitting here in front of you that's going to show you what works for me. Anyway, Charlie Mato-Toyela signing out. We'll see you again tomorrow, next week, whenever you take the next class, because there again, it's at your own pace. I would suggest space them apart a few days so you give you a chance to practice the techniques of the first class and then practice the techniques of the second class and so on. However it works for you, you can do that. I look forward to seeing you again.